Oxygen Blast technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
Now, the last little piece that I want to talk about here is I just like to talk about a pretty nice update that took place in Windows Presentation Foundation with .NET 4.0. For all of you Silverlight programmers out there, you have probably worked with something called the Visual State Manager before. Now, the VSM is a way that we can reincorporate visual cues when we're building custom templates. So if you were to make a custom geometry in Blend, and then you wanted to say, hey, that geometry should be a clickable button, you could just make a user control out of that, and you would have a clickable geometry. Problem is, you would not have any expected user cues. You know, when a user clicks on a button with the mouse, they expect it to look indented, for example. Well, the Visual State Manager was a way to say, okay, you define these things called visual states. And then within any visual state, you can go ahead and create a storyboard. Storyboards are just an abstraction for an animation sequence. You can then transition to different states either in code using a class called the Visual State Manager, or you can also do it in markup with a go-to-state action. Alright, so that's what Silverlight programmers have had since the very beginning. Well, WPF solved that problem with a very different approach using something called the trigger framework. What a trigger is basically a way to kind of intercept an event condition in markup, and then when that condition is encountered, then you could execute a storyboard. Well, the trigger framework is still completely supported, but a lot of programmers felt it was a little overly complicated. So with 4.0, WPF now has a Visual State Manager, which works pretty much identically to what we have in Silverlight. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo here that illustrates how we can work with that Visual State Manager. But also, as you can see on this screen, there's some other features that WPF got in 4.0 as well. A lot of them are kind of small beans, you know, things that we probably don't have to get too thrilled about, but a couple of nice pieces here. For example, we have a couple new controls, including a data grid finally. This one here is actually pretty nice. Animation easings are now supported, so we can very easily incorporate physical effects like bounces and springs and snapping. That can be done very simply now too. But for this talk, I just want to focus on the Visual State Manager because that is a pretty nice update. And what I want to do is I want to actually flip over to Expression Blend. Now, I'm not sure how many of you WPF folks are using Blend. If you were anything like me early on, I was kind of a self-proclaimed XAML jockey. Now, I'm not saying that I was a complete expert in XAML, but I really felt that I could get everything done if I just typed it all myself. Until I started to do some more complicated things, like making templates or working with animations. Then the amount of code that I had to work by hand was pretty bad. So I finally decided to dive in and check out Blend, and I was a little bit resistant, that's for sure, but the more and more I played with it, the more I fell in love with it. You know, these days I think that Blend is actually pretty essential for any large-scale WPF or Silverlight project. So here, I have a project opened up in Blend. It's a little jackpot game. Some of you might recognize this from my C# book. So let me go ahead and just run it first so you can kind of see how it's going to look when it's all done. So here I have a little custom control. And you can see when I click on the star, I can go in and out and it changes the visual states. Right? Well, these little visual cues, that little bouncing effect and so forth, that's all being done through the Visual State Manager. So let's take a peek at what's going on here. I got two projects opened up in Blend. They're both interrelated. This project over here, that's just for this little spin control. Okay, I'm basically randomly flipping through one of three images. We can see that I basically have a bordered image. And then inside of the code, nothing too crazy here, I'm just dynamically picking one of those three images. And then I have a method on my custom class called spin, where I just start my storyboard. Okay, so that part's not too crazy. And that's not even about the Visual State Manager yet. That just describes what's happening in this library. So this is the actual Windows application, which is referencing this library. And here is the artboard for this custom layout. This guy right here, okay, this is the class which is going to be working with that Visual State Manager. So let's go ahead and check him out. It's called the star button. Okay, so I have a little designer for this particular button. And my artistic skills are not probably even good enough to draw this star. So just in case you're not aware of this, if you were to go to the Assets tab, there's actually a whole bunch of these predefined shapes now. So I actually nabbed my star from right here. This is a new feature for Blend 4. So you can find a lot of these built-in shapes. And these are actually instances of something called a rectangular polygon class. So that's all this guy is. If I take a look at the markup, again, really nothing fancy when it comes to declaring the shape, right? I just have this regular polygon. We can see down over here I have my data. And I did handle 3 events. Okay, inside of those 3 event handlers, okay, that is where I'm going to be communicating with the Visual State Manager to tell it to look different ways based on what I'm doing. So if the mouse has clicked down on the star, I want to start one animation. If it enters or exits, I want to start different animations. So again, if we just look real quickly at the running program, you can see how when I go in or out of that star, just a real subtle change of color. And if I click it, kind of happening too quick, you can see it bounces there a little bit. Well, those are the visual states that I defined. And check this out. Okay, all of this code, markup, all this markup right here. This is the kind of stuff that you just don't want to have to type in by hand. You know, Visual Studio has no support for building animations. There is no animation editor. So if I wanted to achieve the same thing, I'd be typing all that myself. And it's not like the end of the world. It's just pretty grungy XAML. So that's a great example right there about where Blend can really make your life a heck of a lot easier. Because all that selected markup was actually generated using this guy.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.